Imagine waking up one day to find 5 massive shipping containers blocking your driveway, and the HOA, the people who are supposed to help, are the ones who did it. A furious man arguing with HOA members, eviction notices slamming onto a desk, security footage of vandalism, and a smirking protagonist holding a document labeled property deed. But here's what they didn't know. I own their land. And what happened next? Well, let's just say they never saw it coming. HOA's worst nightmare begins now. Stay till the end, because this revenge, it's legendary. I woke up to the sound of metal scraping against asphalt. It wasn't the usual early morning noises. No birds, no distant hum of traffic. Just a deep, resonating clang that rattled my windows. I groggily pulled back my curtains and blinked in confusion. My driveway was blocked, not by a car, not by some overgrown tree branch or stray garbage bins. No, someone had dumped 5 massive shipping containers in front of my house, cutting off access completely. I stormed outside, still in my pajamas, to get a closer look. The containers were rusty but sturdy, the kind you see stacked on cargo ships. There were no markings or signs, just 5 behemoths sitting directly in front of my driveway like some kind of twisted barricade. Panic kicked in. Who would do this? Why? I scanned the street, looking for clues. A few neighbors peered out from behind their curtains, but no one approached me. That's when I noticed something else, a laminated sign taped to one of the containers. I ripped it off and read the bold, capitalized letters. Property of HOA. Temporary storage for community use. No unauthorized access. HOA? What HOA? I had never signed up for any homeowners association. My house wasn't part of any community group when I bought it, and I'd been living here peacefully for years. So why was an HOA suddenly dumping their junk on my property? Frustration burned in my chest. If they thought they could just block my driveway without permission, they had another thing coming. I stormed across the street to my closest neighbor, Mrs. Connors, an elderly woman who had lived in the area for decades. Do you know anything about this? I gestured to containers. She hesitated, glancing around nervously before leaning in. The HOA, they said it's for a community project. Something about emergency supplies. What HOA? I asked again, this time with more urgency. She sighed. They formed about a year ago. Started small, just a few rules about lawn maintenance. But now, they think they own everything. I clenched my jaw. I had never signed any agreement to be part of an HOA. How could they claim authority over my property? Determined to get answers, I followed the laminated sign's instructions and called the number listed. A woman with a clipped tone answered. Green Pines HOA, this is Carol. How may I help you? Yeah, I'd like to know why there are 5 massive containers blocking my driveway. There was a pause, followed by a casual, almost dismissive reply. Oh, that's for community storage. You'll need to access your property from the side street until further notice. Excuse me, I snapped. This is my driveway, my property. You can't just block me in without permission. She sighed like she was dealing with an unruly child. Sir, all homeowners in Green Pines are required to comply with HOA regulations. If you have concerns, you can file a formal complaint, but I never joined the HOA. I interrupted. Another pause. Then a forced chuckle. Sir, all properties in this area are under HOA jurisdiction. If you didn't read your paperwork properly, that's not our fault. Click. She hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. They were trying to gaslight me. I wasn't about to let some self-important HOA tell me I had no choice. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play dirtier. The next morning, I visited the county clerk's office. I asked them to pull the records from my property, searching for any mention of an HOA agreement. Nothing. No documents. No signatures. No legally binding contract that tied my home to any HOA. Armed with proof, I marched straight into the HOA's office, which was located in a small rented-out building down the road. The same woman, Carol, was sitting behind the front desk, filing her nails like she had all the time in the world. I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge, I said, slapping the paperwork onto the counter. She barely looked up. That would be Mr. Langley, our HOA president. He's in a meeting. Then I'll wait. A few minutes later, a pudgy, balding man in a navy suit waddled into the lobby. His smile was tight, his eyes cold. "I understand you're upset about the storage units," he began in a slow, condescending tone. "But as an HOA member, you need to respect." "I'm not an HOA member." I shoved the documents at him. "See for yourself. My house is not, and has never been, part of your association." He barely glanced at the papers before shrugging. "All properties in the Green Pines area automatically fall under HOA rules." "That's not how it works." I shot back. "You can't just force someone into an HOA without a signed agreement." His fake smile faded. "Sir, if you refuse to comply, we will have to issue fines. We take violations very seriously." "Violations? For what? For refusing to let them steal my property?" It took every ounce of restraint I had not to lose my temper. Instead, I met his gaze and said, "I suggest you remove those containers. Immediately." He smirked. "Or what?" I didn't have an answer yet, but I'd soon find a way to destroy them. The next day, I received a fine in the mail. $500. The reason? Obstruction of community resources. I almost laughed at the absurdity. They were fining me for blocking my own driveway. Then came the threats. A second letter arrived, warning me that continued noncompliance could result in a lien on my property. They were trying to strong-arm me, pushing me into submission like they had done with the other homeowners. I wasn't falling for it. I needed leverage, something to fight back with. That's when I got an idea. I returned to the county clerk's office, this time pulling records on the HOA itself. I wanted to see who owned their land, their office, their so-called community spaces. I didn't expect to find what I did. As I combed through the property documents, my eyes landed on something strange. The land where the HOA office sat, the private clubhouse, even the community park they so proudly controlled. None of it belonged to the HOA. I double-checked the name on the deed. My breath caught in my throat. It belonged to me. Somehow, without realizing it, I had purchased not just my house, but a chunk of land that the HOA was illegally operating on. They weren't my overlords. I was theirs. And if they thought they could push me around, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the deed in my hands. There was no mistake, no clerical error. I owned the land where the HOA office, clubhouse, and even the so-called community park sat. A slow grin crept across my face. They thought they had power over me. They thought they could push me around, threaten me, fine me, and even try to steal my property. But in reality, they were the trespassers. I wasted no time. I needed a lawyer. Fast. If I played this right, I wasn't just going to get those shipping containers removed. I was going to make them pay. The next morning, I walked into the office of Daniel Fisher, real estate attorney. He was a sharp-dressed man in his 50s, with the kind of no-nonsense attitude I needed. I placed the documents on his desk. I need to confirm something. He adjusted his glasses, flipping through the papers. His brow furrowed, and after a few minutes, he looked up at me. "This is legitimate," he said. "The land is yours. HOA headquarters, clubhouse, all of it. They're squatting on your property." I exhaled slowly, feeling the first real sense of relief since this nightmare started. Daniel leaned back in his chair. They must have assumed it was part of their jurisdiction, or maybe they never even checked. But the law is clear. They owe you rent, or they have to leave. Rent. A new idea formed in my mind, one that made me smile. I wasn't just going to kick them out. I was going to make them pay for every single second they spent on my land. That afternoon, I returned to the HOA office, this time with Daniel by my side. Carol, the receptionist, rolled her eyes when she saw me. Back again? I smiled. "I think Mr. Langley will want to see me this time." A few minutes later, Langley emerged from his office, looking irritated, but his expression shifted when Daniel handed him the official notice of rent demand. "You've been illegally occupying my land," I said coolly, "and now you owe me rent." Langley's face turned an interesting shade of red. "This is absurd." The HOA owns this land. Wrong, Daniel interrupted. My client owns it. And per property law, you now have two options. Start paying rent immediately or vacate the premises. Langley's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. We need time to review this. You have 30 days. I folded my arms. After that, I begin eviction proceedings. Langley was still sputtering as I turned on my heel and walked out, feeling their entire empire begin to crumble beneath them. I knew the HOA wouldn't go down without a fight. Sure enough, within days, the retaliation began. First, I received a notice of delinquent fines in my mailbox, over $5,000 in bogus charges for violating community storage rules and unauthorized legal action. Next, they started a smear campaign. I overheard whispers from neighbors claiming I was trying to take over the neighborhood or shut down the community spaces. Langley had clearly been spreading lies, hoping to turn people against me. Then came the legal threats. A letter from the HOA's lawyer arrived, claiming that my property ownership was being disputed and that they would challenge my claim in court. I smirked. Perfect. They had just walked into my trap. Daniel and I were ready. We had evidence. The original property deeds, tax records, county approvals. The HOA? All they had were empty threats and arrogance. The court hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. I arrived early, dressed sharply, with Daniel beside me. Langley and his lawyer sat across from us, looking far less confident than before. The judge reviewed the documents. Daniel calmly presented our case, laying out every legal precedent. Langley's lawyer tried to argue, but the facts were indisputable. Then came the best part. The judge folded his hands. It's clear that the plaintiff legally owns the property in question. The HOA has no legal right to occupy or manage it. Langley turned pale. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant is ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days or begin paying back rent. I leaned back, enjoying the stunned silence. Game, set, match. The judge's decision should have been the final nail in the coffin for the HOA. They had 30 days to vacate or start paying rent. But I knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. Barely a week later, I received another letter from their lawyer, a formal request for an appeal. Langley and his cronies were scrambling, trying anything to stall their eviction. I smirked. I was ready for this. My attorney, Daniel, filed a response blocking the appeal. The court had already ruled in my favor. The HOA had no legal standing, no documentation, and no chance. The judge quickly denied their request, reinforcing their deadline. 20 days left. That's when the real desperation began. I started noticing strange things happening around my house. First, my trash bins disappeared. I found them dumped 2 blocks away. Then, someone tried reporting my house for code violations to the city, except my property was in perfect compliance. But the worst? One morning, I woke up to find graffiti sprayed across my garage door. Landlord scum. I clenched my fists. They wanted a war? Fine. It was time to turn the tables. The HOA had spent years bullying homeowners with their ridiculous fines and power trips. But now, they were weak, exposed, and desperate. I decided to talk to the neighbors. I started with Mrs. Connors, the elderly woman across the street who had whispered about the HOA's overreach when this all started. She didn't hesitate. They've been terrorizing us for too long, she said. I'd love to see them gone. Then there was Ben, the single father 2 houses down. They fined me $300 for leaving my bike on the front porch, he scoffed. I'm in. One by one, I rallied support. I shared the truth. The HOA had been illegally operating on my land and was now facing eviction. I exposed their shady tactics, their bogus fees, their intimidation. By the end of the week, over a dozen homeowners had joined me. We weren't just taking down the HOA. We were taking back our neighborhood. With the deadline fast approaching, I made my final move. I had Daniel draft a formal eviction notice. It wasn't just for the HOA office. It was for everything, their clubhouse, their storage units, even their bank accounts. Then I did something that made Langley absolutely lose his mind. I hired a crew of movers. The day before the eviction deadline, I showed up at the HOA office with a truck and a team of workers. Langley was there, his face flushed with panic. You can't do this, he stammered as a mover started boxing up HOA files, furniture, and computers. Oh, I can, I said with a smirk. Your time's up. He turned to his lawyer. There has to be something we can do. But his lawyer just shook his head. They had nothing. One by one, the HOA's offices were emptied. The clubhouse? Cleared out. The ridiculous shipping containers in front of my driveway? Towed away piece by piece. Langley's empire was crumbling before his eyes. And I wasn't done yet. For months, the HOA had been trying to extort me, filing fake fines, blocking my property, even vandalizing my home. Now, it was time for payback. With Daniel's help, I filed a lawsuit against the HOA. I demanded compensation for trespassing. They illegally operated on my land. Harassment, fake fines, and legal threats. Property damage, graffiti, trash dumping. When Langley got the notice, his face turned ghost white. This is ridiculous, he muttered. We don't have the money for this. Exactly. The HOA had spent years hoarding homeowners' fees. But after the court case, their legal battles, and now their forced eviction, they were broke. Langley tried negotiating, offering a settlement. But I refused. I wanted every last penny. Within weeks, it was official. A judge ruled in my favor. The HOA was bankrupt. Without funds, without power, without even an office to operate from, Green Pines HOA collapsed. And just like that, they were gone. The community? We celebrated. Neighbors threw a block party the next weekend, free from fine, harassment, and ridiculous HOA rules. As I stood on my front lawn, watching kids ride their bikes without fear of getting a violation notice, I smiled. The HOA had tried to bully me, threaten me, even ruin my life. But in the end, I owned them, and I had won. With the HOA officially shut down, the neighborhood felt like it had been set free. But I wasn't done. The board members, Langley, his cronies, and the so-called leaders who had tormented homeowners, weren't going to just walk away without consequences. I had spent months collecting evidence of their abuses. The fake fines, the misuse of HOA funds, the intimidation tactics. They weren't just corrupt. They were criminals. So, I made sure the authorities knew. I filed formal complaints with the city's housing department and local law enforcement. I handed over bank records, proof of embezzlement, and even testimonies from homeowners who had been extorted by the HOA. It didn't take long before the authorities got involved. One morning, I saw Langley's face on the local news. Former HOA president under investigation for fraud and misuse of funds. I smirked. Perfect. The investigation moved quickly. The authorities discovered that Langley and his crew had been siphoning money from the HOA accounts, using community fees for personal expenses, expensive dinners, vacations, even payments to a private golf club. When confronted, Langley tried to lie his way out of it. But the evidence was overwhelming. Within weeks, he and 3 other board members were charged with fraud, mismanagement of funds, and even tax evasion. They had spent years terrorizing the neighborhood, thinking they were untouchable. Now, they were facing criminal charges. I watched from my porch as Langley's house went up for sale. The man who once acted like he owned the neighborhood was now forced to leave it. With the HOA gone, the real work began, fixing the damage they had done. Homeowners finally had control over their own properties. No more ridiculous fines for small things like paint colors or parking too close to the curb. No more threats and intimidation. The community park, which had been locked down for HOA members-only events, was now open to everyone. Neighbors came together to fix up neglected properties, repaint fences, and clean up common areas. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a real community. And best of all, we were free. Now that I officially owned the land where the HOA's headquarters once stood, I had one last move to make. That office building, the empty clubhouse, and the storage spaces, they were prime real estate. I put them up for sale. Within a few months, I had multiple offers. A local business wanted the space for an office. A small daycare center was interested in the clubhouse. When the deal finally closed, I walked away with a six-figure profit. The same HOA that tried to ruin my life had ended up funding my next big investment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The nightmare was finally over. The HOA was gone. Langley was disgraced. The neighborhood had been restored. And me? I had turned their biggest weapon, control over property, against them. Neighbors who once lived in fear of the HOA now waved when they saw me. The entire neighborhood was thriving without them. One evening, as I sat on my porch, sipping a well-earned drink, Ben, the single dad, walked over and grinned. "You know," he said, "I think you just became this neighborhood's real hero." I chuckled. Not a hero, just someone who doesn't like bullies. The HOA had picked the wrong guy to mess with, and in the end, I owned them.